The topic of tolerance and diversity is something that's very personal and important to me, and something that I'm already very involved in. So what can I add to your thoughts on the topic that you might not have already heard? My focus today, Study Streak, an EdTech solution to inequality. Something that I consider a real blessing is that in my 23 years of life, I've been able to make friends with people from completely different backgrounds. From state schools to private schools, from Surrey to inner city London, and from bankers to rappers. I get to listen to unique experiences on a daily basis, and it's helped me to see life through completely different perspectives. So while we cannot, and perhaps should not, guarantee that everyone is rewarded in the same way, everyone should be entitled to the same opportunities. So why is this my focus? Why am I so passionate about education? Why is it so relevant to diversity? Well, here's some numbers for you. In 2018, 74% of the House of Lords, 74% of the Cabinet, and 68% of the House of Commons were men. In 2017, 94% of the House of Lords and 92% of the House of Commons were white. And perhaps most shockingly, 45% of Conservative MPs, our country's elected government, were privately educated, even though private schools only educate 6.5% of the population. Unfortunately, having gone to a Russell Group university and having worked in the financial sector, I can tell you that these disparities do not only hold true for our government, but for our top firms and universities. So let me ask you, how do you feel that the top decision makers and influencers in our country don't actually represent our country? Are men smarter than women? Do white people just work harder than ethnic minorities? And does a paid education entitle you to better opportunities? Of course not. That doesn't mean that successful, privately educated white men haven't worked for their success. But it is fair to say that being born a certain way gives you access to better opportunities. And I want to look at educational opportunities. I was lucky enough to go to the school that we're in today. But most of my friends that I made during my school days, my university days, and my graduate days weren't. And our schools were very different. I think some of the teachers here might agree that when I was young, I was a bit disruptive, a bit troublesome, a bit disengaged, the class clown. But luckily, or not so luckily at the time, I was the exception. I was at a school where failing and being disruptive wasn't cool, where teachers had the time and the energy to help both those who were struggling and those who were doing well. A school where top grades were considered an expectation rather than a challenge. But this isn't everyone's reality. Large class sizes in state schools across the country mean that teachers are often forced to make students sit still, listen for long periods of time, and regurgitate information. And it's proven that this isn't the most effective way for most people to learn. So I just want to do a quick experiment. All you need to do is put your hands up when I say. Who here learns best when there's a competition or a game involved? So a few of you. Who here learns best when there's a video or a visual element involved? And you can be honest, but who here just didn't really care about school when they were there? Oh, yes. Okay. So you can see everyone's a bit different. So why is this our situation? Why can't teachers motivate all the students that want to learn and do more for the most disruptive, rather than leaving them to fail or excluding them from mainstream education altogether? I think that before teachers can even think about how they're going to approach individual students, their evenings are spent either marking or developing new lesson plans. And marking in particular is something that I've heard a lot of teachers complain about. A teacher close to me actually left me with a quote: "A tired teacher is worse than an unprepared teacher." But is that a choice that we really want our teachers to make? I like my teacher to be well prepared and well rested. And I think these problems are only highlighted in the most poor and diverse areas. So I've spent a lot of time talking about the problems that I think exist in the education industry. But where does EdTech and Study Streak fit in?
However, the natural monopoly argument is the main argument which is put forward in support of monopolies as opposed to competitive markets in some cases, and is the reason why government supports and even owns some monopolies in the real world. Take, for instance, Transport for London's, TfL's ownership of the London Underground. In fact, TfL possesses 100% of the market share in the London public transport market. TfL is an example of a natural monopoly and is the reason why it is supported and subsidised by the government. In the London public transport market, it is naturally most efficient to just have one firm, TfL, operating in the market. It would be extremely inefficient to have a number of firms providing underground train services and transport networks in London.
So maybe you were just glad to take a break from my voice. But looking around, I saw quite a few faces that were genuinely intrigued. Innovations in technology have meant that most industries are able to automate manual processes and focus more on consumer engagement and experience. And education shouldn't be any different. As it stands, for teachers, it kind of goes a bit like this. Spend your evening devising a prescriptive lesson plan, spend the next day trying to teach that lesson, only to go home and then mark or develop another lesson, and then repeat. Students are often forced to learn a range of subjects that may or may not interest them, in ways that may or may not interest them, all for reasons that may or may not interest them. So our aim is to tackle the problems of disengaged students and overworked teachers head on. One of the ways you've just seen, but it's still up to teachers to be able to motivate all of their students and make them care. In an ideal world, teachers would have access to high-quality lesson plans, automated marking, and gamification. They'd be able to have high-level data to see how students are progressing, who's doing well, and who needs the most help. The aim would be to save teachers time and their energy and let them do what they love to do, teach. But energy to do what exactly? An interesting concept developed by Matthew Said and Carol Dweck is called the growth mindset. And growth mindset is, simply put, the attitude that to get good at something, all you really need to do is work at it. The attitude that for someone who's currently struggling at maths, it's because they're not good at it yet, rather than not being good at it at all. The attitude that almost anything is achievable. And we want this energy to go towards instilling a growth mindset in all students. So many students underachieve because we have an education system that rewards a certain kind of work ethic and work style, and lets the other students buy into the idea that A, they can't achieve at a high level, and B, even if they could, it's not worth the time. And that's a dangerous mentality that can hold you back at any point in life. And it's up to schools to develop a certain level of self-confidence in all of their students. And if you've ever met an arrogant grammar school student, this is probably why. So what have I tried to achieve through this talk? What are my aims through Study Streak? Some of the most insightful conversations that I've had have been with people that didn't go to university or don't have the most prestigious jobs. But society is so geared in favor towards academic success. The better you do in school, college, and university, the better your job and your standard of living. It's not as black and white as this, but a lot of talent is wasted because, as I keep saying, we don't have an education system that gets teachers excited to teach and students excited to learn. And I hope that I've shown that there's still a bit of work for diversity to be done in this country. And I hope through Study Streak to be part of that process of change. I hope through Study Streak to be able to give the most underprivileged a quality education that they can afford. And I hope to be part of a wider change to bring a quality education system. I just want to end on a slightly different note. In the build-up to this, I was watching a TED Talk by Simon Lancaster on how to speak like a leader, and he stressed the importance of rhetoric and influence above everything else. What I found really interesting was that he said in the past that every school used to teach this because how can society be fair if only a select group of people have this tool of influence in getting their arguments across? But in 2018, the only school that still teaches this is Eton College. So how fitting that I leave you with one last statistic. Of thousands of schools in England, 19 of our 54 British Prime Ministers have gone to Eton. Yeah, thank you.